Hello and welcome to the first edition of My Cyber Why for 2020. We're really excited that you can join us. Today we've got a guest who's I've known for a very long time, so it's really wonderful to be able to have you on the program. And he has done a lot of fascinating work in the cybersecurity space. I'll let Gunnar explain that about what he's done. But right now, Gunnar Peterson is working as the Chief Architect for Cybersecurity Technology at Bank of America, and absolutely really thrilled to have you here today. Welcome, Gunnar.
Hey, great to see you again, Diana, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's get started. Who is Gunnar? Who's Gunnar Peterson?
Sure. So like I said, I run the cybersecurity architecture team at Bank of America. I like making things. I like building things and building teams. And obviously, you know just as well as I do, because you've been in this a long time, cybersecurity is one of the most interesting challenges around. And just like it's a team sport, so it's as much a technical challenge as it is a team building challenge. And both of those aspects really matter.
Yeah, that's very true. I was at a conference last week, and someone said it feels like there's a contention going on between, is it about the technology or is it about the people? And I said, oh no, that's not how we really think of it at all. You know, we in cyber, we tend to think of it as that triangle of people, process, and technology. So it's not that they're fighting each other as much as they're all supporting each other to make a really strong whole.
Yeah, I think so. And you've seen it where you could be a great solo developer, lone wolf developer, and do great things. You could be a great pen tester and be a lone wolf pen tester and do great beneficial things for organization. But if you're a defender, defense is absolutely a team sport. There's no one person that can defend anything. So it's about building the right collaborations and bringing the right people to the party at the right time, and getting the right mix of skills. So that is something. I don't know they have a lot of things at all the wonderful security conferences that are out there, but it seems like a place that's maybe could deserve more study and scrutiny.
Yeah, good point. So it sounds like you build teams in addition to building architectures. A lot of people don't really understand what a cybersecurity architecture is, or even what a technical architecture is. So I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what you do and what architecture means in the cyberspace.
Sure. So our team covers a pretty broad range of areas. We cover application security, identity access management, cryptography, virtualization, network, and a whole host of other areas. But you're right. The word architecture can mean lots of different things to different people. What it means to us is we start from the place of trying to understand what our partners are trying to deliver. What are the use cases they're building towards? What are the platforms they're trying to build towards? So security doesn't exist in a vacuum. We want to start with what is the functional set of requirements that our partners are trying to build. From there, then we build the threat model. That's really where the security process starts to kick into gear. And we take those threat models, we drive them out into our security designs. Those security designs then get linked up with what does the developer need to do to build them, what does the tester need to be able to test them, what do the operations people need to do to run them. So it's really about bringing all of those things together into a cohesive package.
Do you create blueprints like an architect for a house or a building would?
Yeah. So there's blueprints, design patterns, reference architectures. All of that goes into it, and I think where we really try to focus is that's where security sort of architecture starts, but that's not where it ends. Unless you can make the most wonderful blueprint in the world, but it's just going to be shelfware if it's not something a developer in your organization can execute against, can test against, and can operate. So we pay a lot of attention to linking it to the people who actually have to deliver, so that it's not architecture shelfware, it's architecture in reality.
Yeah, it's interesting in the physical world, right, there's this whole movement towards design build, which is that the architects who are designing the structure that's going to be built are also the ones that are involved in the building process. And it's, it feels a little bit like where we're going with DevSecOps too, which is that you've got to have what you're talking about is, yeah, a blueprint's great, but if it's not buildable, if it's not implementable, then, it's not going to be able to meet the requirements for the partners and the customers.
Yeah, and I'll even go back further than DevOps. If you go back far enough to Jane Jacobs in
Okay.
New York City in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, what she would talk about was the architects that did the most interesting work then. And if you've read her like Death and Life of American Cities and things like that, it was the architects and town planners who walked across the city every day. So they didn't just have things on a whiteboard in their office and never went outside, ivory tower style. It was the architects who walked back and forth across the whole city every day, understood how the city worked, understand how the city didn't work so well, and tried to find the opportunities based on its specific context. So that's Jane Jacobs is a good one to keep in mind if you think about how we try to operate across a range of areas.
Yeah, no, that's a great reference. And I think that's the difference between people who understand, putting a technology in that's going to be usable by people, MFA, right? If you think about when we first just had the dongles, it was a little bit harder to get uptick, but people kept thinking about, well, what can we do? And phones got popular, and now a lot of us use our phone as our second factor. So yeah, looking at how to make it usable for people in addition to keeping it a business resilient.
That's right, and it became more usable as it became more embedded with the technology. So it wasn't just a security thing; it was part of your daily user flow.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so why? What motivated you to get into tech, to get into cyber, and to ultimately to be the chief architect at Bank of America?
Well, I think the range of challenges is what's interesting to me. If you think about security underpins so much of our life now. Technology underpins it, and security underpins the technology. So, it underpins the online commerce, underpins healthcare, on and on the challenges go. I think what's interesting, in terms of the why it's interesting, is in cybersecurity now, we have to engage, we get to engage with a wide range of stakeholders. The business people driving the platforms, the software teams driving the solutions, the operations people that drive it 24/7, 365. So we have the sort of unique privilege, I think, in cybersecurity these days, that we get to engage across a very wide range of stakeholders. Everybody has some stake in cybersecurity today. It's not just like, oh, it's a separate department. It's a department that engages across a wide range. So what's interesting to me personally, and how we work through this, is we build neurodiverse teams. We build diverse teams. We also build neurodiverse teams. And I think cybersecurity is unique in the sense of recognizing that the threats to our systems are not just these little cookie cutter threats that we can predict, right? We're in an inherently unpredictable place in cybersecurity. The threats are unpredictable. And so the teams cannot be comprised of cookie cutter thinkers either. So that puts extra impetus, I think, on managers and team builders to seek out and engage creative thinkers, and to look at areas across the neurospectrum. So it could be dyslexia, it could be dysgraphia, could be Asperger's or autism spectrum, and try to find people who can think across the environment. As I mentioned, our security design process begins by understanding the platform. And from there, our sort of Jedi mind trick is to invert the functional use case that our partners are going after, and to invert that to build a threat model. So here's the set of things we want to have happen in the use case, and then we invert that, because we're security people, to say here are the things we want to avoid in the form of a threat model. From there, though, the goal of the threat model is not just to enumerate threats, so security people like us can get our yeehaws out, right? The goal is to take those threats and drive them into, as you said, a security blueprint. But we don't stop there. We drive that out to the developers, the testers, the operations people. And I think what I've learned over the years is one, that's the best way to get the leverage of your security people, because you're making their work cover broader areas, development, test, and ops, and you're making their work more impactful. And to do that, again, it's not about a cookie cutter thinker. There's not one type of thinker that can do all of those things. So we need people who are excellent at thinking in patterns. We need people right at the beginning who can take a problem and invert it, and build threat models. We need people who are excellent at communications to drive out the solutions to all those different stakeholders. So, problem inversion, pattern thinking, and excellence in communications, those are things that we see very frequently in neurodiverse individuals. And so that's been an area that we've really invested a lot of time in. Another example would be innovation, right? Everybody likes to talk about innovation. And we tend to summarize our work as we're delivering security strength at scale. So you can think about an x-axis and a y-axis. So the y-axis, a lot of people come into the security profession, myself included, and they think the job is to raise the y-axis all the way up. So raise the strength of security capabilities. And that's obviously one of the most important areas. There's a second area, which is the x-axis. How do you progress and scale those security capabilities out? You gave the example of multi-factor. Multi-factor has been around since the early 90s at least, and it didn't become broadly adopted for 20 years. So how do you get that broad adoption of security capabilities? And those types of innovations to deliver things at scale are just as useful as raising the strength. And so people who can come up with ways to take the assurance level of our crypto up a few notches are incredibly valuable, as are people who can take that same crypto capability, make it available with only 3 lines of code, and you can have security or cryptography available as a service. That kind of innovation is just as valuable. So to us, diversity isn't really a talking point, right? It's a competitive advantage. The qualities that we see in neurodiverse individuals in our teams, they drive positive changes across the whole business. And it can sound clinical when you're talking about diversity and neurodiversity, but it's important, and there is objectively more value here for businesses by building teams comprised of these individuals. But it's important to remember these are real people underneath all of that. And so there is extra work for managers to do to make sure we get the mesh together what the business needs, what the individuals can provide, and make sure that all lines up for the organization and the individual.
Yeah, it's great points. Is that there's a lot of talk about neurodiversity, cognitive diversity now in teams, and great studies showing that it can make them stronger. But I do think that you hit on a really good point, that it may feel a little clinical to some people hearing it, and just actually getting, when you start to work in teams that are very diverse, when I was back at Burton Group, I think it was Dan Bloom who said this, points upon which reasonable people may disagree.
Right.
That's when you really get that kind of a conversation going, reasonable people who know their stuff, but are coming at it from a slightly different view. And that's when you start to see these teams fire each other up. I remember, some of those conversations, just my brain going in a place it had never been before. And then new paths were opened because of that.
And that is really what security architecture is all about, is taking all the different viewpoints and trying to mesh them together. And so the diverse and neurodiverse dimensions they're fundamental in that.
And you do it because you love it. Is that your why? It's there. It seems like, as you talk about it, that there's just a great
I think I got into it as a security architect, just trying to build the best solutions for my customers, for my partners, and it turns out to be the best way to do exactly that.
That's the right thing to do. Okay, so the last question is sort of a call to action. how would you like people to get more involved, or what would you like to see people doing that may help them to be stronger in cyber or help others be stronger in cyber?
Sure. I think the first step, especially if you're a manager or a team builder, is really getting to know your people well and understand their capabilities, and try to match that to finding their cyber why, right? To use your term, what is the cyber why that's driving them, and and what capabilities are they bringing, and match that to the organization that you're working for, which is going to be different in every case, but trying to find that center of the Venn diagram and thread the needle with what they're capable and what drives them. I think it helps a lot to work with people who have similar values. So the bank focuses on diversity across a range of spectrums. It's definitely committed to neurodiversity as part of our mission. And I have an article I'll share from Craig Froelich, our Chief Security Officer, which talks in some detail about how we see it as a competitive advantage, good for the individual, good for the organization. I think in terms of what people can do in their own lives, it's important for managers to be approachable, right, and be good listeners. Again, like you said, it's not just a clinical thing. Neurodiversity is a competitive advantage, but it's not just one thing, right? It's a spectrum. Each person is different. Each situation is different. So managers need to learn what drives, what motivates those individuals, and find the best ways to take the very unique capabilities and match that to the mission of the organization.
Yeah, it's a great point. And also, it's interesting because we talk about the diversity, but then there also does have to be a set of shared values. Like I would assume a value at the bank is that it's important to keep the customer data and the customer finances in order, right? So you want to have that same, so that some shared values, and also some areas where people are very diverse.
Yeah, I mean finding the way those two things align. The bank has 200,000 employees, and there's a lot of different roles. Cybersecurity is obviously extremely high on the list, and so I don't have anything to add.
No, understood. Thank you. And actually, you used a better term earlier, which was you talked about the Venn diagram, right, of where we've got that great overlap. Thank you very much, Gunnar, for being here and sharing your wisdom. And thank you very much for the work that you do every day to help keep the financial space safe and secure.
Diana, thank you for having me. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and it's always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next month on My Cyber Why.